Hello everyone, I am Rod and I am the game design instructor for the Academy of Entertainment Arts over at Dixie Hollins High School. If you are one of my students, it's Mr. Flowers to you, and welcome to this video tutorial. Alright guys, so what we're going to do today is make a bearing for our fidget spinner. So you can see right here that I have one already made. And that's the video. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to make this from scratch to kind of see how a bearing works. But before we get into that, we'll look at how a bearing works. So we have two pieces. We have an outer piece and we have an inner piece. And inside we have these little spheres. Alright, so the way this kind of works is this central piece kind of holds it together. And these spheres are held into the ring, into this outer ring, by this center piece. And then this outer ring will spin and it will glide along the spheres because the spheres are going to rotate, and that will give us the spinning of our bearing. So a pretty simple concept, not too complicated here. But to get this shape, we have to do some fancy work. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this off, and you'll see how I put this together. So let's go ahead and delete that, kill that. Now as far as our grid setup, my grid is actually set pretty big, and I'm working in centimeters because we can only print something within about 5 to 8 centimeters in range here. Our tolerances are not very tight. So come up to polygon primitives. We're going to start off with a cylinder, and I'm just going to hit F to frame up on it. And we're going to make this the appropriate size for our fidget spinner. So again, my units are in centimeters, so 1 here is actually 2 centimeters, because so our radius from the center out is 1 centimeter, so this is 2 centimeters across. And then the height, I'm going to make it half a centimeter, so 0.5. And then my radius, I'm actually going to put my radius out to 1.5, so 1.5. Okay, that should give us a decent size bearing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the center of the sphere. So I'm going to hit F11. That'll take me in the face mode. And then I'm going to go and select these top faces. Now when you select these, make sure you're not doing it at an angle. If you do it at an angle, like I just did here, the back of it is also selected. You don't want to do that. Okay, so I'm just kind of going to grab the middle. A little box is fine, so like I do like a little box like that, and that's fine. That'll grab both the front and the back like that. Just make sure that we're not grabbing the sides here. With that selected, I'm going to hit delete, and now we have a ring. Let's go back into object mode, and now I'm going to create the inner ring. I come down to here on my polygons tab. Now you can go to create, but I'm just going to click the cylinder that's here, and that should drop one in the middle, and that looks fine. And I changed my height down to 0.5 like I did before, so that should give me an inner ring of about the same height. And my inner radius looks like it's fine at about 1. That's hunky-dory. But this outer ring here needs to be taken care of. We can't print something with 0 wall thickness, so we do have to extrude this to make it thick. So I'm going to grab this outer ring, and I'm going to go on my polygons tab, and then in the middle of the shelf here we have this little tower looking thing. This is our extrude tool. Let's go ahead and hit that. And I'm going to extrude this, this little panel that pops up. We have our Z local axis. If we pull on the Z arrow, you can see it expands out. I'm going to set something, I'm going to do 0.2, and that should give us a wall thickness good enough to work with here. Alright, I'm going to hit Q to kind of get rid of that, and I'm going to go back to object mode by pressing F8. So now I have an inner radius and an outer ring. Okay, and now I need to start adding my spheres. So let's come up here, and under my polygons tab, just grab a sphere. And I'm going to reduce this down. So the way I'm going to change this is over here on my polygons, inputs here, adjust my radius. I'm going to go for 0.24. And don't worry, our sphere is just hidden underneath our object there. To get this back to the center, if you moved it, just up here type 0. Okay. To line this sphere up, I'm going to do it in the top view. So spacebar. All you gotta do is tap it, and then hover your mouse over the top, and then spacebar again. And I'm going to center this sphere up right about there. Now we do want our sphere to kind of cut into our geometry. So I'm going to go to my radius here, and I'm going to bring this up. That's a little bit too much. About 0.34 looks like a good one. You just want to make sure you're not coming out of the top here. Okay? So I'm going to bring that back down, 0.25. We don't want to come out of the top of the ring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back down to 0.24. Whoops. And instead of trying to make this sphere bigger, because I don't want to make it bigger, I'm going to make this ring, this interior ring, bigger. So let's go in top view. I'm going to push my sphere slightly into the wall, about that far. And then I'm going to take this outer ring, or sorry, I'm going to take the inner ring, and I'm going to change its radius. Let's see how big I can get it. 1.2 seems to be just fine. It's cutting into the sphere a little bit. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. So now that we have my mouse is jumping because we're at such a tiny tolerance here. Now that we have our sphere set, we're going to duplicate it. So Control and then D on the keyboard will let us duplicate it. You got to be in object mode for that to work. And I'm just going to line this up, and I'm going to give a little bit of a space here between the two spheres. We can't have them touching because then the printer is going to have an issue. Okay, but just a little bit of a gap, not a big gap. And then I'm going to duplicate that one, and I'm going to pull that off. Again, I'm going to give it a little bit of a gap. And I want to try to keep the gaps about even, so just kind of eyeballing it. We don't want too much space. We want this to be filled with as many spheres as we can. I'm just going to go around in a circle here, adding one sphere at a time. And again, keep an eye on your gaps. You don't want to that a gap like this. That would be way too big. So right about there is fine. Now as you're making these, this all also depends on the resolution of the printer. Our printer should be good at about 0.2 millimeters. So this is probably going to print just fine. If anybody's watching who has a printer with less resolution, you might want to do it a little bit different. And when we're done, we should have about 12 spheres, maybe 16. We'll give a quick count afterwards. You can see that I'm on sphere 16 right now, or 15 right now. And you can see here, like this sphere, I'm way too far on the wall. I'm going to pull it out. Make sure that we're centered as we're going through, because we don't want this to cut through the wall of our ring. Just kind of keep an eye on that. And I should have enough room for one more, and I do. I'm just going to go around one more time and make sure that my spacing's good and that I'm not through the wall. You don't want to be cutting through the wall like this. So we only want to be part way through. Like this one's way too far. I'm going to pull it in. And the reason you don't want to be too far on the wall is when the printer prints, it will end up fusing the bearings with the outer ring, and that's no good. A bearing is not useful if the parts of it are fused together. So just watch your spacing. All right. So now that you have all of your spheres lined up and everything's hunky-dory, we are going to do a little bit of voodoo magic to fix this inner ring. So as you can see, the spacing between this inner ring and the outer ring is so close together that it's actually overlapping our spheres. But we did that on purpose because we want our spheres to be tightly fit inside here. Okay? So we're going to cut a groove in here that will allow us to have a perfect slice for our spheres to move in. So make sure you're in object mode, select the inner ring, and then select the outer ring. With both of those selected, come up to your Polygons tab, and then right here, there's these two yellow rectangles inside of a circle. That is the Combine tool. It'll turn both of these into a single object. So go ahead and hit Combine. So now if we jump into our perspective, if I were to select either one of these pieces, they would be one object. That's pretty cool. But now we need to cut that channel. So to make that channel, we're going to add in a torus. So the torus is this little donut looking thing right here. Make sure we're on polygons and drop in the torus, and it will drop that in. I'm going to go back into a top view so you can see. Now on a torus we have two radii. We have the outer radius, the radius of the actual torus, and then we have the inner radius. That's this little hole here. So the outer radius I'm going to make 2. That's going to give us this nice big thing. And then this inner radius I'm going to do 0.2. So the inner radius should make this section about as wide as our sphere. So I'm going to take the regular radius, I'm going to bring that down now. Let's do 1.5. Okay, that's not small enough. Let's try again. And what I'm shooting for here is to get the size of the inner radius to be on the edge of my spheres, and then the outer edge to be on the back of the spheres. So I'm just going to kind of play with the numbers here. So that one gets the outer, and then this inner one, let's do 2.4. It's probably a little too big. 2.24. And then I'll dial this one back down. So as you can see, this is not precise. It's a little bit of guesswork here. I'll do 1.2. Not quite where I want it to be. So 1.3 seems to work. 1.35. 1.36 looks like. 1.35. All right, so for me, it worked out at 1.33 and a inner radius or a section radius of 0.24. And that works out for me. And I'm going to go around this one more time just to make sure that my other spheres are not like through the wall here. So you can see like this one is outside the wall just a little bit. I'm going to move it back so that it is mostly inside the wall. Same thing with this one. Try to keep them as even as possible. I'm going to push my torus just a little bit more. So over here I'll do, let's try 0.25. And that looks like right on the money. So I changed my section radius a little bit just to fatten up the torus enough to envelop the spheres. I'm going to check in my perspective view, and you can see that we're still inside. You don't want the torus to be outside the ring. If the torus is outside the ring, you have to play with your numbers and dial it down, because this has to be pretty precise in order for it to work. So now with our size the way it needs to be, we're going to select our bearing and then select the torus. Okay, with both of them selected, you want to make sure it's in that order. You have to select the bearing first and then select the torus. Come up to mesh. If you don't see the mesh tools up here, make sure in the drop down we're under modeling, and then mesh, and then come down to Boolean, and we're going to do a difference. And what this is going to do is it's going to subtract the shape of the torus from the shape of our bearing. And there we go. So now if we look inside of here, we have a perfect ring that conforms to the shape of our bearings. See that? And that should give us a really nice play with the bearing. Okay? So that's our bearing. And now you should be able to print it and see how it looks. When you print, you're going to want to make sure that you have either scaffolding on here to keep the bearing, because these bearings are floating. So you'll need either scaffolding or a raft of some sort for these to adhere to. Okay? So that's the bearing part. So let's pretend we want to make a fidget spinner. We can take our current bearing and we can modify the outer ring. I'm going to go into face mode, and I'm just going to select a couple faces. I'll just do 2. And then I'll go to the next corner, and you can tell that I'm on my front. This is my front, that's my Z. You can see the line going through. This is my X. I'll just kind of go through and make sure that I am there. And now I will extrude. So hit the extrude button again. That's this little tower. And I'll go ahead and pull that out. You can see there's our shape for our spinner. I'm going to be a little bit more precise. Dial this in. And all I'm doing is changing the angle a little bit, so our spinner can have some detail. And then I'll extrude again. So I'll just go ahead and hit extrude. And then I'll pull out this blue arrow. And you can see as it goes, it gets wider. Let's go ahead and hit this, and we'll widen that up. And I will do one more extrusion. And what I'll do here is I will kind of curve this in so that we have sort of like a fan blade or something. Now you guys are welcome to shape this outer piece any way that you like, but be aware that if you do what I did and you taper it in, that you will need to have scaffolding on here because this is free floating. Okay. That's just in the printer settings. When you go to print it, make sure you have scaffolding selected. And now I will adjust my top piece here. I'm just going to grab this part and this part just to pull these out. So all I did is I marquee selected, and then I held shift, and I went over to the other one. I did a drag and select for that. And then I'm going to hit my scale tool and just kind of pull this out. Scale tool. And then I'm just going to grab this one and that one and pull that out. I'll give it some roundness to it. Alright, so the last thing you want to do before you go out and print this is you're going to want to clear history. And the reason for that is we did a Boolean operation, and what that does is it does that cut that we made, right? We subtracted part of that mesh. The issue that we're going to run into if we don't clear history is that piece of geometry still technically exists as far as Maya is concerned. So if I go up to Windows and I come down to Outliner here, Outliner shows us all the objects in our scene, and we have our two cylinders. So this is the first cylinder, the second cylinder. That's actually these two, this inner ring and this outer ring. So those are two separate pieces that we fused together. And then down here we have a third mysterious cylinder. Where'd that one come from? And then right under there we have P torus 1. Well, we subtracted that, right? So technically that shouldn't exist anymore. Well, it's still there. So what we need to do is clear our history. So go ahead and select all of your objects. You can see them all selected here. Okay, make sure they're all good. Come up to Edit, come down to Delete by Type, and choose History. And you'll notice that when we do that, all the extra pieces of geometry are gone. And we have one cylinder, which is this, and then we have our 17 spheres that we created. Okay, so now our geometry is clean. We don't have to worry about any major bugs with it or anything like that. Okay, so this should be good and ready to print. You are welcome to smooth this if you want to. If you come up to Mesh and then hit Smooth, it's going to do a smooth job on it, and you can see what kind of result you might get if you smooth it out. Now when you do that, you might lose some volume for how your spheres are going to connect. So you have to take a look at it. And you're also going to have a little bit of curvature on this base, like central platform here. So just be aware of that when you do a smooth. And I would not smooth this above 1 or 2 subdivisions. It's not really necessary. And let's say if I do 10, for example, you'll see you get a little warning. It says division level 10 is high, may take a while to generate, blah, 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 blah. So I'm just going to say no. But there is a finite limit to how many subdivisions you can add to a model depending on your computer or anything like that. So usually 1 or 2 is fine, but I wouldn't go above, let's say 2. You really don't even need it. Okay. So that's that. I'm going to drop mine back down to 1. Actually, I'll do 0. And I'm going to print mine like this and see how it comes out. Go ahead and do test prints. Let me know what yours turn out to be. And I will see you in the next video.